Recently, I've been looking through the Wii's catalog of games, digging around for things that I might have missed over the years. And I feel like looking back to when the Wii was new, I missed a lot of the really unique and creative games that were coming out for the system. I think in large part due to the Wii's low graphic quality and high sales, it had a lot of these unique games that were coming out that I completely missed out on while I was busy playing Smash Bros. Or Mario Kart. But all of that searching now led me to Fragile Dreams: Farewell Ruins of the Moon. The game's aesthetic in the cover art and all that sort of thing really caught my attention right away, and I just knew I had to check it out. The game came out in 2009 in Japan and was translated in 2010 by Xseed, who were really champions of mid-2000s Japanese localization. Known simply as Fragile in Japan, it was translated to Fragile Dreams by Xseed in North America, where it got a full English dub. That Xseed logo is usually a dead giveaway that there's something interesting made from Japan here, but it can often obscure who actually made the game. To my surprise, Fragile Dreams was developed by Namco and Tri-Crescendo, who had hands in many other RPGs around the time, like the Tales of series and Baten Kaitos. While Fragile Dreams might not have the exact same team of developers, having that backing certainly piqued my interest even more. The game is some sort of survival horror game mixed with light RPG elements, with some really great environmental design to boot. And now having played the game, I feel like I've got to talk about it because it ended up being one of my favorite experiences and the most fascinating games I played in the last year. Fragile Dreams had a really surprising level of artistry, and I found myself constantly pausing and reflecting on the narrative. And so today, I hope you'll join me as we take a deep dive into Fragile Dreams: Farewell Ruins of the Moon for the Wii.
At the very end of a summer that was all too short, the old man I was living with passed away.
Fragile Dreams has a deeply melancholic atmosphere. It starts with narration from a young boy named Seto who spent most of his life living at an observatory until his grandfather passes away around his 15th birthday. The night after burying the man, Seto digs around the observatory to see if there's anything he left behind. You pick up a flashlight and follow a stray cat to the back of the building and end up running into a masked spirit. After a short confrontation, it vanishes into the night, but Seto finds a letter and a blue crystal left by the old man. Without much instruction, it tells him to travel east to the red tower there. With nothing left for him here, Seto grabs his things and leaves it all behind, beginning the story.
And Seto,
Thank you. For everything.
There's an animated intro that really gives you some perspective on the world of Fragile Dreams. Everything is in a state of decay, and while there is occasional levity sometimes in the story, the game has a pervasive sense of isolation. It's obvious that something terrible has happened to the world, and it isn't explicitly told to you, at least for now. Seto will spend his days traveling through what remains of Tokyo, but there doesn't seem to be anybody else around. Eventually, though, he runs into a mysterious girl. He finds her on his way to the Red Tower as she's singing a song about the moon. She falls and passes out for a moment in surprise, and he touches her cheek to check if she's okay, but she wakes up and runs off down some stairs into an underground train station. I really love the line here about her warmth, because Seto's been alone for so long that he's only really interacted with one person his entire life. He just hasn't been made aware of the things that used to be, and he's been on his own for so long that noticing a warm body at all is enough to motivate him to drop everything and follow the girl. He's characterized as a little timid and has a bit of that typical anime boy angst, but it's easy to feel sorry for him. Seto's desire for connection is his primary motivation, and it's really the through line of the entire game. It's an intriguing beginning, to say the least, and at this point I was already pretty sold on seeing how this story would unravel. Once inside the tunnels, Seto finds a small device called a personal frame, or PF for short. The PF is an AI of sorts that guides Seto through the tunnels, and he ends up carrying them around like a backpack as they guide him along. While I originally thought that the PF was something like a robot without much personality, it ends up being somewhat of a companion here. Together, the two of them head deeper into the station, starting a tutorial of sorts.
I'm sensing something that means to do us harm, just ahead.
It's hard to define this game's genre, but Fragile Dreams is most similar to a survival horror game with some light RPG elements. You can control Seto as he explores the ruins using a flashlight and makeshift weapons that you find in the area to hold off ghosts. The Wiimote will point his light wherever you need to look, and you can also zoom in on objects to inspect them, in order to find extra details or items. Scattered through the maps are fire pits where you can save, heal yourself, and store items that you've collected. Your inventory is managed on a grid, somewhat like in the Resident Evil games, and your weapons have a durability to them, which means you'll have to manage your resources. Though they aren't rendered entirely useless, they just can't do anything other than a basic attack. The vast majority of the game, you'll find yourself rifling through an area, fighting ghosts off to earn XP and items while searching for the way out. Referred to as malicious thought entities by PF, these ghosts take on multiple forms and appear as jellyfish monsters here. Their spirits are left behind by the thoughts and feelings of people that have passed on during the disaster and will attack you on sight. They aren't visible without your flashlight, and the light makes them easier to defeat, but it's hard to notice that part of the mechanic. You'll need to make use of the sticks and brooms that you find to handle each battle, but combat frankly is not the game's strongest aspect. Fighting can be stilted and awkward, and Seto's animations can feel unresponsive due to their long animations. There's some skill to using each weapon, as they each have some sort of special ability to master. Like, for example, the sticks will do extra damage if you time them properly. But most of the skill expression is understanding the safest way to beat each enemy type to avoid needing to waste precious things like healing items. Your inventory is always very limited, so wasting space in the bag for extra healing or weapons can be a bit of a pain. In the first area, there are the jellyfish, these dogs, and hand ghosts, but most of them don't really pose much of a threat. The dogs will run at you in a straight line, meaning you have to move to the side and attack, and the hands can try to reach and grab you. You do still have to be a bit careful. Later on, I would learn that it's best to move the Wii pointer just off the screen so you can easily move Seto around without strafing accidentally, and that made combat a lot easier. The combat is sluggish, it's hard to control, but it does get better later on, at least a little bit, as you learn how to deal with each ghost.
Well now, this is a rare treat. It's not every day I chance upon someone.
Whoa. Who are you?
You can find some weapons laying around, but you can also buy and sell them from this funny merchant guy that you meet in the station. He's looking for interesting and shiny objects dropped by ghosts, and he'll trade you for some of his items like food or weapons. From here on, the merchant will show up occasionally when you stop at a fire. It's random, but he can be pretty useful when you run out of good sticks to use. After some fights against some more hand ghosts through a train, the tunnel leads Seto outside to a beautiful sunrise. This game has some pretty great visuals at times, and the moments when the game lets you out of the dark are always really gratifying. PF said that they have memories of a small area back inside the station where people used to live, and so you find the ghost of a young girl that has a key that you need. This means playing hide and seek with her while listening to the Wiimote speaker and sneaking around by crouching. It's a simple minigame, but not that special, though the Wiimote listening mechanic will show up pretty frequently later on. What is special is that you end up bringing this ghost piece by finding their mother, and the two of them can leave happily together. These short little stories come to really define Fragile Dreams, and they're probably the game's greatest strength, and this is just an early example. The whole game is littered with small bits of environmental storytelling and episodic sections of the plot that can be genuinely moving at times. It's one of those games where even if the combat and the gameplay isn't the greatest, the story was always motivating me to continue. After getting the key from the little girl, Seto can head into the underground mall back through the station.
This place used to be alive with bustling shoppers.
In the past, maybe. Looks pretty run down now.
I surmise that the frequent earthquakes took their toll on it. Indeed.
Fragile Dreams isn't explicitly a horror game, but it can be pretty spooky at times. I found that most of the horror elements came from the sound design and the environmental design as opposed to the story or the moment-to-moment gameplay. I'm usually pretty good with horror stuff, so maybe your mileage will vary, but the Underground Mall was the first area that I really started getting that good horror discomfort. Something about the crudely drawn sketches left behind by people that once lived added so much to these dark, dingy hallways that make up a lot of the game. It just had me looking around at decaying buildings in silence, thinking about who left it there and why. I think also the low poly kind of Wii era vibe of the game adds a little bit of it too. It isn't the scariest thing here I've ever experienced, but the sketchy vibes of these locations definitely had me checking my surroundings out a lot of the time. My curiosity was more driven not out of being interested in scares, but because I wanted to know how things got like this. I've got to say that the sound design, though, absolutely carries the atmosphere and the enemy encounters especially. These school kid ghosts that show up in the mall aren't really that bad, but the echoey laughs that phase in and out are way scarier than the actual enemies are. The best feeling was seeing a new monster and hearing a noise that you weren't familiar with, because that lack of variety can often make things less scary. It's like a fear of the unknown sort of thing. After I know what a certain ghost sounds like and acts like, I just kind of know how to react. But still, when I did find a new ghost, it would always bring a little bit of excitement to see what new spooky noise that was. I wouldn't sell anybody Fragile Dreams on its horror elements, but they're not bad by any means.
No, they are scary.
A lot of the times, the main goal is just trying to figure out where you need to go to proceed. Places tend to feel a little maze-like, especially with so many tunnels showing up in the game. Especially when it's so dark, it can be hard to tell where you've already been. Something I really appreciated about the game when I picked up my own copy was how the booklet was stylized to look like a notebook. In-game as well, all of the UI menus are meant to look like Seto's own handbook, to the point where even the maps are hand-drawn. It's such a small attention to detail that adds a lot of life to something as simple as checking where you are. And I loved looking at all the little notes that are coming from his perspective. It turns out that nobody was living in the underground mall, and the girl was nowhere to be found. But Seto and PF found themselves following drawings the silver-haired girl left behind. Finally, they find an exit to return to the surface, but just as they get there, PF reveals that their batteries are depleting rapidly, effectively meaning they're about to die. If I had to be honest, I didn't expect this scene at all, and assumed that PF would stick around like a Navi or Fi from the Zelda games. For a metal box with a voice, they do an incredible job giving them a personality, and Seto immediately attaches to this character. It's a really deeply gut-wrenching moment considering, again, it's a metal box and a dude in a room. PF realizes they never got Seto's name, and just as it shuts down, he tells them.
Seto. My name is Seto.
This was the moment where I knew I was in for something special. The whole scene is given so much sincerity, and it was just heartbreaking to see this guy that has nothing lose the closest thing he found to a friend almost instantly. A lonely guy whose only friend is an AI he carries around is a little bit too real these days, but it's not hard to imagine someone with his life experiences latching onto something like that so soon. There are these monologue dreams that play between major events in the story, and after PF dies, you get to see another one. They're very solemn and dejected, but really capture the energy of this world that Seto occupies. It's really great stuff. There's nothing left to do, so he buries the machine just like he did with his grandfather and moves on. Once again, Seto is alone and heads off into the surface. From the moment Seto steps out of the underground mall, he immediately faces something different. An abandoned theme park and a strange boy named Crow. Everything about Crow feels off. He moves quickly and refers to Seto as a human. Without much thought, he steals the locket that Seto's granddad gave him. He'd placed mementos of his old man and PF inside of it, so he demands that he gets it back.
If you want this thing so bad, you'll have to catch me to get it.
As more characters show up, the quality of the cutscenes reminded me a lot of the Tales of games from around that time. The Namco roots run deep, and even the voice cast is very similar. At first, I recognized Johnny Yong Bosch as Seto, since he was Emil in Tales of Symphonia 2, also on the Wii, but Troy Baker, Roger Craig Smith, Laura Bailey, and so many other popular names show up in some form. The English cast isn't credited at any point in the game or manual, but it's very easy to hear who's who.
It's too bad we never found that girl down here. I wanted to thank you for saving me.
The majority of their voices are used for these memory objects you can find while exploring. When you take them back to a fire, you can get to listen to memories associated with them, which take the form of audio logs. These things were pretty common as a trope back at the time, and I remember them mostly from the BioShock games, but here I think they're handled really well. Sometimes areas will have a whole story told through these memories in a few parts, and they're often these fascinating looks at the lives of the people that were living just before the end of the world. A lot of them can be a little bit cheesy or played out, but I'd still listen along and look forward to see what each one had in store. I feel like I have to give respect to the game for convincing me to actually listen to these audio logs for once.
Dang, that was pretty gloomy. I should have left it on a more positive note. I'm almost out of time.
An abandoned theme park makes for a great horror location, but I just wish you got to interact with more of the attractions. Crow will shout at you to find him and leaves behind these signs that direct you where to look. Meanwhile, these pigeon enemies show up that are a real nuisance. They take a long time to get within range, and it can be easy to miss your opportunity and just be forced to wait for them to come back. Once you do manage to find Crow, he puts you through a bunch of minigames while you try to get that locket back. This might be the worst part of the game, though. Seto has to awkwardly chase him around a carousel and then sneak up to him in a field. You aren't fast enough, and your crouch doesn't do anything here. Instead, the solution is some ridiculously janky thing where you sit inside of a teacup and wait for him to enter a very rigid, not looking at you state. It doesn't work very well, it isn't instructed very well either. Once you know how to do it, it's just a matter of not getting stuck on anything while you try to catch him. Which took me a lot longer than I'd like to admit.
Man, you're dumb.
Thankfully, all of this running around leads to a really cool and creative section where you follow him along a roller coaster track. Around here is where you start finding projectile weapons like the slingshot, which helps a lot with the flying enemies, though it does take up a lot of inventory space to keep it. It's a cool section with solid environmental design, and I love just the skyboxes in this game. Eventually, the tracks lead you to a trapdoor, though, which sends you into the service tunnels beneath the park. In there, Seto finds a story about a pirate who meets a young boy, which mirrors Crow and Seto's interactions. You find your way out of the tunnel, but another masked spirit shows up as a sort of boss fight. It isn't very tough, though. Seto ends up chasing Crow all the way up to the park's Ferris wheel, but Crow slips off and crashes down in a ride below. Somehow, he managed to survive the fall and takes that as a sign to stop playing games.
Yep, you win. I give up, okay?
The two of them make up, and Crow shows Seto a photo of him in a hospital gown, with a man that appears to be some sort of doctor. Crow's been searching for the place in the photo, and he can't remember anything about his past. It turns out that Crow, on his travels though, had met a girl at a hotel nearby that might know something, so the two decide to split off.
Well, thank you.
Can't say I expected that, but it's more of a sign of Crow and Seto's naivete than anything else. He says he read it in a book, a lot like how he knew how to interact with Seto because of his pirate story. It's a sign that the two of them have made up. Crow gives Seto a skull ring to keep in his necklace, and they both leave as friends.
See you around.
Yeah. Bye then, for now.
I was really surprised pulling up to the abandoned hotel. The transition was done really well by having you walk through this canopy of trees, and then when you emerge, it's suddenly bright out. It almost made the change in time feel unnatural, but in a good way. I don't think Fragile Dreams is the only game to do it, and probably was far from the first, but just the concept of walking around an empty, dark building and just inspecting all of the graffiti just never got old for me. The memory items here tell a story of a girl getting married just as things were coming to an end, and there's something really beautifully haunting about how there aren't any people to attend other than her, the husband, and the father. These bittersweet stories do so much more to make this game way more memorable than the sum of its parts. The same can be said about the main story of this area as well. After rummaging through the empty suites, Seto runs into a ghost girl named Sai, and it looks like they were going through some sort of procedure before they died. But Sai seems to know a lot more than she lets on, and decides to follow Seto around, excusing it as just being bored. It seems like she was the girl that Crow was talking about, and she starts following you around and can offer hints in the same way that PF would. The two of them meet another ghost here, named Chio. Some of the silver-haired girl's drawings are on the front door of her room, but she won't let Seto inside. To prove he's trustworthy, he has to run back to previous areas and give her a star from a Christmas tree, a moon from the theme park, and eventually a ring somewhere in the hotel. The ring is held by a possessed tree living in the hotel restaurant, and it's one of the game's few actual boss fights. I thought the mask ghosts were more like bosses, but they actually function a lot more like standard enemies, as opposed to the tree, which is more of a unique encounter. And it turned out that the bow was really effective here, so I just threw a bunch of arrows at it until it died. This whole section might feel like a bit of filler though. Backtracking is never the most fun thing to do, especially in a game with such mundane and slow walking speed. I did manage to gather quite a lot of resources in doing so, and after this point I'd end up with somewhat of an overstock of most things. The biggest issue is always the inventory space. When you pick up an item, the game doesn't reveal what you've got until you reach a fire pit, so I'd always end up running off to the closest fire as soon as I filled up on goodies, in case they happened to be worth something, or just to have more room for stuff ahead. Still, the hotel is a cool location that introduces these ghost women that definitely shocked me when I first encountered them. They've got more great sound design, and I love the concept. I've always really enjoyed these Japanese folklore type ghosts. I think yokai is the correct word. I don't want to be wrong though.
Rather than having some things, it's more important to have somebody.
Huh?
I also really like the new flashlight that you get here. It's a green light that reveals messages left behind by spirits on the walls, which can offer hints on where to go. I mostly just loved reading all of the freaky notes though that they leave behind. Most of them are just messages saying, don't go here, or, something dangerous is approaching. But the way that it isn't translated in this version of the game, and instead gives you subtitles when you inspect them, actually kind of enhanced the vibes. Walking up to a message that I can't read, and then seeing a little subtitle that says, don't come here, or whatever, was almost more scary than it would have been just by reading it as I walked by. The only issue is that this special flashlight, as it's known, isn't a toggle, and it takes up inventory space. Eventually, I'd have to swap back to the standard light to avoid just having a big green circle on screen at all times.
Here. We found your ring.
Once you recover the ring, Chio finally lets you into her room. The star and moon were simple tests, but the ring was her wedding ring, which she had lost just before passing. Chio is actually an old woman, laying in a hotel bed just as she's about to pass on. Somehow her ghost appeared even though she's technically still alive, but that's not important. Now, having finally found peace with the ring, she gives Seto some advice to appreciate the little things, and reflects on her own time alive.
That's the moment when you'll realize the truth. The sunbeams, the wind rolling over tall grass, the idle chit-chat with friends. These were the gems of your life.
She gives him a flower brooch to use as another memento, and moves on.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart.
The following scene is one of my favorites though. Seto and Sai are standing on the roof of the hotel, and she asks him what his plans will be when he actually finds this silver-haired girl. He says, "If I think the moon is beautiful, but nobody is there to listen, that feeling will disappear and there won't be any evidence he ever felt that way at all." His motivation is so simple, but I think it's also so earnest. It's about being heard and just having somebody there. Seto doesn't really care if there's even more to say about it, and a simple acknowledgement is all he wants. Coming right off of that emotional scene with Chio passing away, this sort of quiet introspection felt very cathartic. Soon, a cat shows up that leads them down to a manhole which appears to have another one of those girls' drawings on it, so Seto and Sai decide to head down. Hey there. I just wanted to say that if you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you liked the video, subscribed to the channel, commented, or especially shared the video with people that you think might enjoy it. All of that stuff really helps a lot to support this video and get it off the ground so it can meet more people. That's all I've got to say. Thanks for making it this far into the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. From this point on, I noticed the level design taking a bit of a turn for the worse. Which is to say, it took no turns. This tunnel is literally a straight line. I think it's meant to evoke some sense of realism of space. The entire map of Fragile Dreams, I think, could realistically be placed onto a map and it would make some level of geographical sense, but here it leads to a 15-minute walk down a tunnel with nothing in it except for some enemies. Near the end of the tunnel, you encounter this strange robot enemy that caught me by surprise. Somehow, seeing a little light way off into the darkness, speaking quietly, was way more off-putting than any of the other ghosts had been. It hit like a truck too, and took a lot of resources to take out. Seto walked half a kilometer down this path, but it finally ends with another long climb down a maintenance shaft, rivaling the one in Metal Gear Solid 3. All this leads back into a massive underground network though. You can find some new heavy weapons here, but between the standard light weapons and the bows, I just never found a use for them. At this point, the standard 3-hit combo is actually pretty easy to land and tends to do more damage than the other weapons. I would just keep the range weapons in case I needed them because they're just useful to have, and stick to the green standard weapons. The red pole weapons and yellow heavy weapons are just too slow and cumbersome compared to the others, especially when dealing with these annoying projectile enemies that show up. I think they're meant to be protesting construction workers or something, but they throw these energy balls that are homing on you, and it is a lot harder to dodge than it looks. From this point on, enemies can do a surprising amount of damage at once, especially if you have bad positioning. Most of the time, you can usually just eat whatever healing items you have, but about from here on, too many mistakes could just get you killed.
I'm just exhausted. I can't go on.
These tunnels are obscenely long, but after enough roaming around, you finally find the person Seto's been looking for. The stray cats here all lead you to find the silver-haired girl trapped inside a cell. Before he can ask her name though, the voice of a man commands her to head down the stairs. She runs off again, but it seems like Sai knows who it was. The cell door is locked and there's nothing to do but try to find another way back through the tunnels. The next area is actually pretty neat, set in one of Tokyo's underground flood tanks. You can do some long-range combat for once against those projectile enemies from before, and then there's another boss fight against some sort of mutated giant mole. It was certainly another cool surprise to say the least, but the camera controls in Fragile Dreams don't really work that well with such a small space. You basically play whack-a-mole here, attacking it whenever it comes out and trying to avoid its attacks.
Well, when did you become Mr. Tough Guy?
I guess all that practice is paying off.
Finally, after nearly 3 hours of gameplay footage, Seto and Sai make it back outside. The sun is setting, and they find themselves at a dam that's somehow still in operation.
The light's turned on. That might mean there's somebody up ahead.
Maybe. Although in my opinion, I think we should go back where we came from.
Once you walk across the dam, Seto finds the girl stuck inside an elevator. He can't reach her behind the glass, but she asks for his help. Yet again, he can't reach them, and she gets sent down into the dam. I really like the shot here, though. It's another long climb down the dam to get inside, slowly walking back and forth over rickety floors. This mechanic has shown up a few times already, where you have to sort of just slightly push the stick to crawl across this floor without falling. Fragile Dreams does try to do a lot with the experimental side of the Wiimotes and nunchuck, but I don't really think it always works out. I didn't properly understand how to get the tips from Sai and PF earlier on, but you're supposed to raise your Wii remote to your ear like a phone. I would kind of come to realize that a lot of the novelty of using the pointer controls was actually less convenient than just using the stick, and I ended up using that most of the time. At one point, I really slowed down on zooming in and inspecting stuff and pointing at every little thing, and would end up just walking around with my Wii remote not pointed at the screen. The dam is more of the same gameplay-wise. You'll fight more enemies, collect more resources, and then fight more enemies. There isn't too much new variety here, but this is where the story really starts to pick up. I'll be talking about the rest of the game here, but I really recommend playing this one for yourself for the story. So if you're interested at all, I'd experience it yourself firsthand. Consider this your spoiler warning. Save the video and come back if you decide to play the game, but if you just want to hear, let's continue.
It's so noisy in there. I wonder what's inside.
What's up ahead is like nothing we've encountered. If you want to turn back, now's the time.
Look how shiny and sparkly this one is. What do you think of it, Princess? Princess, I found this on a beach far to the north. The ocean sparkles.
Reaching the interior of the dam, you'll run into the merchant who appears in a makeshift kids' room. Turns out he isn't human, and he's some sort of robot that's been attempting to take care of a baby inside of a crib. It's clear to Seto that the kid's already passed, but the merchant can't tell the difference, and he desperately tries to get his princess to smile again. He freaks out as soon as he sees Seto and kicks him out immediately.
Be gone, you vermin! Get out and never come back!
Later on, deeper into the dam, the merchant runs into you again and apologizes, acting as his usual chipper self. He explains that he's been collecting these objects and shiny things to attempt to bring the princess to wake up. Sai and Seto decide to just let it go and not tell him the truth. Even the merchant is cursed with this idea of trying to bring the princess back, and Sai concludes that death is only something that the humans can perceive. Not long after, Seto and Sai stumble into a room filled with destroyed dolls and find Crow sitting inside. Crow is the same as the rest of these dolls. He's not human, and more of a realistic robot like the merchant or PF were. Seto desperately doesn't want to lose another friend, but just like PF, his battery has nearly run dry. Crow slowly fades away, just like everybody else has. It's a really somber scene.
Thank you for everything, Seto.
I wish that Crow had more of a resolution to his story, though you can infer what happened to him. The dam is where these dolls begin showing up as enemies, meaning that in some way he did find where he belonged, but it was obviously not what he expected. I'm not sure if it's on purpose, but the death cry of the dolls actually sounded a lot like Crow to me. Back in the theme park, he said he could sense where he was heading, and that he had to make up for wasted time. While he's thankful to have met Seto, he had to get there to find out the truth, and when he did, it doesn't seem like there was much left for him. Sometimes these cutscenes don't stick the landing as well as I wish they had, whether due to the gameplay between them or the limited time spent with the characters, but it works out when you put it all together. Every character has a very clear motivation and personality, and all of them, even as they pass, are snapshots of this dying world. The constant barrage of really heavy subject material doesn't really stop, but I absolutely love how each segment works like an anthology of short stories. You can really imagine what Crow's little adventure was like here, waking up and then sort of self-actualizing with Seto and then finding the reality of his situation in the dam.
All I need to do is close my eyes, and your face appears. Clear and forever young.
Before you make it to the end of this section, you actually find a radio that also manages to connect Seto to people outside in the world. There is a small glimmer of hope here in this overwhelmingly isolated story, and it means that things aren't as bad as they could be, and there's still a chance.
I promise you, I'll come see you very soon.
Good. I'll be waiting. I'm always waiting.
Looping back to the top of the dam, Seto finds an area that's sort of like a laboratory and finds the silver-haired girl trapped in a machine they previously referred to as the glass cage. When they get outside, Shin, the man that seems to be running this power plant, takes control of a crane that turns into another boss. Like most of the bosses, you fire some arrows at it and it takes it out.
You know, there's a chance you might not meet anyone else, that you won't see another living human ever again. That this planet will become a world of ruins and wandering spirits.
The return of the aurora in the sky means that the glass cage, the thing that wiped out humanity in the first place, is going to come back. Seto and Sai, though, have to make a choice afterward. Sai knows Seto might not even get along with this girl that he's chasing after, and even after risking his life for her. Normally, these sort of whiny anime boy protagonists are pretty silly of a trope, but I totally believe it when he just breaks down and cries thinking about the situation he's in. Seto's life is miserable, and the one person that seems to have almost had a shared experience with him is constantly being taken away. With a little bit of Sai's motivation, he steals himself and they move on. She says the way to the girl might be back through the cell where they met earlier, and she leads the way. It's time for more tunnels. I don't think I have to say that fighting stuff in Fragile Dreams is not the best. I've probably said it a dozen times already. But I felt like at this point, it was never something I was outright against doing. To play defense for it, it's not like it's unfunctional, and there's at least some level of thinking required to have you optimize the way you handle enemies. You need to learn what every enemy type does if you want to finish them off efficiently without wasting your items. Even if I was pretty overstocked on weapons at this point, inventory space was always a question. I was doing triplet notes in my head trying to time the stronger attacks and had to learn how to dodge the attacks from each ghost. Sometimes the enemy AI will get stuck and refuse to open up a weak spot, but sometimes you can suss it out by acting in a certain way. Fragile Dreams' battle system is not great, but I think after playing the game this far, it isn't completely devoid of merit, it's just a little too simple. It actually reminds me a lot of PlayStation 2 games for some reason. Like, there's a lot of PlayStation 2 games that have combat that's about this good. It's just that by 2010, when this game was coming out, those standards were a little higher. This close to the end of the game, I also wanted to talk about the horror aspects again. While I don't think the game intended to be a horror game exclusively, the earlier sections were a lot more successful at it than anything in the second half. This is pretty much all Sai's fault. She sticks around with Seto throughout the entire game once you meet her. You know when a fight's starting because she vanishes, and you know for certain that the fight is over when she comes back. I really missed that sense of isolation that the game had in the earlier chapters, and I think that the game would have benefited a lot if she split off for some parts. Once you figure things out in a horror game, they tend to lose their edge. But I wish that they had at least tried to keep some of those feelings I had when I first entered the underground mall or explored the theme park before Sai joined up.
The security's been activated.
Coming through the tunnels, Seto and Sai find themselves at a dead end. With a door behind them sealed shut, there isn't much to do, and Sai decides to tell him the truth. Long before the world had ended, scientists discovered the secrets of human connection, and they thought they could potentially end all wars if they could reawaken this latent empathy between people. They developed a machine that came to be known as the glass cage, which sent out a signal across the globe, which would theoretically harmonize everybody's thoughts and emotions. All misunderstandings and hate would be solved, and everybody believed that this project would be a success. But once the machine activated, when people went to sleep, they simply wouldn't wake up. The silver-haired girl functions as some sort of catalyst for this glass cage, and Shin wants to reactivate it to fulfill the project once and for all.
And guess what? The first time around, I was the catalyst.
Sai reveals herself as the original catalyst, explaining the state her body was left in when Seto met her. The scientists experimented on her to try and figure out how to make the glass cage work, but Shin would take care of her.
So you and that guy, well, you were like friends.
You crack me up. I mean, I wouldn't exactly call Shin and I friends. If I had to label us, we were... Wait a minute. How'd that cat get in here?
Just as she was about to go on about their relationship, a cat shows up that leads the two of them to a crack in the rubble and a way out. Finally, Seto runs into the same masked ghost from the very start of the game. It goes on about how the project is still on schedule, but after a short battle with them, there's nothing to do but head deeper into the lab.
Explain yourself, Sai. Why did you let a human in here?
The end of the path leads them into a kid's room of sorts, inside of a laboratory. There, they finally meet Shin in person. Sai tries to reason with him and understand why he wants to restart the glass cage in the first place. He doesn't have much to say, and they just have to do their best to save the girl before it's too late.
But Shin, it's just that if we could just talk, I know that I'd be able to...
That's enough. Soon, everything will be in order.
The last area is delightfully creepy, with destroyed medical equipment laying beside dozens of children's rooms. This is where they would experiment on the catalysts and try to find the right one to complete the project. You can find an old newspaper stuck onto a wall explaining the first day after the glass cage was activated, a spike in sleep-related deaths and a loss of communication with the US. It's a gruesome concept, stealing away kids to try and accomplish something that ends up killing everybody in the process. It's a long stretch with a lot of fighting here, but eventually you reach the actual lab itself. It reminds me a lot again of Resident Evil, having a clean lab setting to round out the end of a game, but it's a pretty short area here.
This is it. Beyond this door is the girl you're looking for.
Finally.
At last, Seto finally makes it to the end of the lab and finds Shin waiting for him with the silver-haired girl. It's a cool setting, with what I can only describe as giant blood cells floating through the walls, and a giant machine in the center holding the girl. Shin wants to wipe out humanity as he sees it as a relic of the past. The spirits created by the glass cage will, in a way, transcend humanity to a whole new state of being that Shin sees as the next stage of evolution. Seto tries to make a break for the silver-haired girl to stop the machine from activating, but Shin gets in the way.
Now is the advent of our era. Humanity's reign is over.
Anyone who threatens the project must be eliminated.
Shin is a pretty simple boss fight with a couple different attacks. You have to hold him off until he has to pause to take a breather, and then you can strike. It isn't too much of a struggle to knock off his health with some good timed combos. Seto manages to defeat Shin, but before he can finish him off, Sai gets in the way. He grabs the AI construct from inside the glass cage and escapes. Though the two of them manage to save the silver-haired girl, the AI already managed to copy what it needed, and the glass cage can be activated. They follow Shin, finally leading Seto to the Red Tower. Seto decides it's up to him alone to take this on, and makes his way up the steps. But before we make it to the top of the tower, I want to talk about one of my favorite memory items here. It's just one last really great, bittersweet story to cap off the end of the game, though I imagine it would be pretty easy to miss this one. It's in two parts, with the first one being a guitar of a musician playing music at the tower. He sits there playing alone until a girl comes by that suffers from insomnia.
What can I say? Your songs put me to sleep.
I'll take that as a compliment.
The second part is the musician's jacket. Now, after the glass cage has been activated, he asks if she wants him to play, as to not put her to sleep. But she says to do it because she doesn't want to be the last person left alive. He abides and plays his song, leaving her his jacket.
See? Now you don't have to worry about being the last one.
It's finally time to take on Shin, for real this time. The rematch with him is nearly the same, with similar attacks, just with smaller windows to strike back. Since he doesn't get tired like he did in the lab, I had to experiment with a few different items to try and figure out how to survive. There were some attacks that I just couldn't figure out how to avoid taking damage with, so I ended up just packing tons of healing items in my inventory and just going with that. I found that swapping to the bow to hit the orbs helped out a lot, and then I'd swap back to the hand weapons for damage. They give you a katana right at the entrance to the fight, which is one of the best weapons in the game, and I would mostly use that. With nothing left to lose, Shin finally explains why he's been doing all of this. The world before the glass cage had turned on Shin. He was one of the researchers working on the Empathy Project and volunteered himself as the first test subject. But in doing so, he cursed himself with clairsentience, which allowed him to feel and understand anybody's emotions telepathically. He learned that people were selfish after all, and got sick of everybody's true thoughts and feelings. In understanding everybody, he learned to just hate them all. That is, except for Sai. Shin thought Sai would support him in his ideals, but she only really just wanted to be with him. Shin would take care of her while she was under these treatments, and they had a bond that they just never really followed through on. Finally understanding each other, Sai and Shin can move on, and he decides to destroy the AI construct, preventing the glass cage from ever happening again.
Thank you for everything you've done, Seto.
Thank you.
That leaves behind Seto and the silver-haired girl to look at the moon hanging over the city. He finally gets her name, which is Ren, and the two of them decide to continue to look for other survivors, bringing us to the end of Fragile Dreams.
Thank you, Seto, for being here.
Hey, Ren! Thank you for being with me, Ren.
Let's break it down. After everything was said and done, I had so many thoughts about this game's story and themes and overall message. I felt like I had to summarize the entire game in this video, not only to go through the gameplay and the experience I had, but also so I could just break down this plot. Fragile Dreams has so much that I think you can pick apart with so many little details that I missed on my first playthrough and only figured out after rewatching all of the cutscenes. I also read some interviews with the original creators, and I really came to appreciate what this game was trying to do. So first off, let's start with some clever and easy to miss plot details. First of all, the ghosts are of course not ghosts in reality, but malicious thought entities, as PF put it right at the start of the game. They might refer to themselves as ghosts, but they're simply fragments of the singular AI that the glass cage created. This explains so many of the inconsistencies in the story, like how Chio was somehow both a ghost and alive in the hotel. It doesn't explain exactly why there are giant moles or living trees, but for those it's safe to assume there's some sort of crazy radiation in the water or something. Either way, the emotion ghosts are either trying to save themselves when they attack you, or are just mindless entities full of emotions. I find the concept to be really cool and unique. Another cool detail that ties into this is that Sai was surprised when Seto could see her to begin with, but it's because he had a similar blue crystal to the AI construct given to him by his grandfather. And that's because the grandfather wasn't blood related to Seto and instead took care of him when he was born because it was Shin himself.
Grandpa gave it to me.
Your grandfather? So he survived? How strange.
Sai talks like she knows the old man, and even gets confused when Shin reappears in the lab. That means that there are actually two of them, one that gave up on the project and decided to raise Seto, and another that lived on as an AI trying to complete the project.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can hear Shin's voice in the letter that Seto reads at the start, and both of them point Seto to the Red Tower, because it's instrumental in the Glass Cage project. The older Shin might have just assumed some people would be still alive at the Red Tower, and the AI Shin needs it to complete the Glass Cage. These AI crystal constructs also serve to explain the memory items as well, and how Seto can learn from them in the first place. I really love how the story is told from the point of view of somebody who doesn't really know what life was like before the end times, and a lot of things like these just don't seem to add up, only because we mostly see them from his perspective. Seto is only 15 years old, and in that time, a lot of things have changed in the world, and nearly everything he interacts with was created before he was born.
Hey, I hear something.
There were two major things happening with the Empathy Project, studying latent empathy in humans and the creation of AI constructs. This led to the creation of the robots like Crow and the Merchant, as well as the catalysts like Sai and Ren. Crow could likely see these ghosts because he's an AI himself, and Ren could see them because she's a catalyst. Because Ren was taken care of by the robots and Shin as a catalyst, it means that Seto was probably the only actual regular human in the entire story. While the robots have secondary roles, they really flesh out the world as well. I think Crow and the Merchant are both defective to some degree. Crow has no memories, and the merchant is obsessed with caring for a person that hasn't been alive in who knows how long. I love how Crow inspects Seto when they first meet, because humans just aren't around, and because the only things he really learned from were books. He just doesn't understand social cues. 15 or so years after the incident, most of the robot's batteries are also about to run dry, which explains PF and Crow's sudden deaths. With that in mind, it's safe to assume the merchant is about to shut down as well. Something that crossed my mind immediately was, why doesn't Seto replace the batteries in these robots? But in reality, he would have no idea what that even is.
Anytime I'm feeling alone, I think about how there's someone out there feeling the same way as me.
I also wanted to touch on the animated dream sequences a bit. I don't know if they're dreams per se, but they were such an interesting storytelling device. They would use these abstract renditions of the characters and objects that Setos interacted with, but they only appeared when something traumatic or life-changing happened. At first, I thought they were literally dreams because one of the earlier ones refers to a dream, but in retrospect, I don't think that's the case. All of them are spoken of in the past tense, and the tone of Seto's voice feels deeper and maybe a little bit more mature, which also makes me think it's an older version of him looking back at the events of the story. At the very least, they're meant to represent the inner thoughts of Seto, but they're so different that it's fascinating to look into. I'm not sure if the intro and outro dreams count as part of the same thing, but the last one leaves a lot open to interpretation. In it, he says after countless summers, Seto is finally truly alone in a peaceful end. That could probably be read as either Seto in the future ends up alone, but the visual of a jellyfish makes me think that it's actually meaning that the AI is finally gone, and so he's no longer connected to anything in that way anymore. The first AI ghosts you see are a jellyfish, and the beginning and end shows a jellyfish, so I think that sort of represents the AI as a whole.
One day, I was all alone again.
Honestly, when it comes to storytelling, I'm not even the biggest fan of explaining every little detail, but I did find it really cool to look back and reflect on the plot after understanding the whats and whys of everything and why things were the way they were. There's a shocking attention to detail throughout the game's world building, and even the things that you might question are easy to answer with just a little imagination. I really loved how the mystery unraveled, and when it was revealed, I was still interested in reflecting on what happened because of the unique premise. In an interview I read, the creator of the game said, "The story belongs to you from the moment it reaches your hands, so I'd be happy if each of you could find something in it." And so I'm gonna have a bit of my own take on the story here. Maybe you won't think it's that deep, but I really enjoyed the setting and the narrative here, and I just want to talk about it. Of course, connection is central to the story in Fragile Dreams, and it plays with the idea of communication and connecting with others in a lot of different ways. Seto is incredibly starved for social interaction, and it's his prime motivator from the start to just have somebody listen to him. But I found it interesting that it really didn't matter who or even what was doing the listening. PF, Crow, and Psy make up the majority of his social interaction, and none of them are even really alive or even really people. They're all AI, and despite the fact that they tell him that they're not real, he always iterates that they're real to him. Crow didn't shut off, he died, and to Seto, that's the reality of the situation. Connection is represented in Shin as well, who functions as an opposite foil to Seto. He doesn't believe there's a point in communication anymore so long as people can resent each other. Even when he had the ability to understand somebody's thoughts entirely, they couldn't understand him. Either way, it wouldn't matter because he wouldn't listen to what they had to say in the first place. Connection and understanding is irrelevant if nobody is listening, and Fragile Dreams concludes that the misunderstandings are worth it so that people can communicate with each other. Even if Seto admits on his own that he just doesn't understand Shin's point of view, it doesn't stop him from desiring that connection, and to just be heard.
I don't understand you at all! But no matter what, I know I need people! I'm sick of being all alone in this world!
Fragile Dreams' world also unsurprisingly carries with it a lot of themes associated with death. Concepts of mortality crop up often and are usually characterized in characters' goals and motivations. The merchant, for example, is in denial of death and can't understand that the princess isn't practically immortal like he is. In a lot of ways, the glass cage turns everybody immortal in a sense and gives the people lucky enough to remain conscious as ghosts an endless life. There's a concept of a second death, being when a person's name is spoken for the last time, and I think Seto is similarly concerned with this. When he and Sai talk on top of the hotel, he says no matter what he thinks, if nobody's there to listen, he can't know for certain if he had thought that at all.
If there's nobody I can tell that to, that feeling will end up vanishing inside me.
In a way, I think that relates to how he views the differences between living and dead. The concept of connection is so important to him. Being without connection is a form of death in and of itself. Another thing that shows up all of the time is the idea of burials and mourning. Seto does his best to respect the dead and often buries or covers anybody that passes away. He buries the old man, PF, and would continue to do so for Chio if Sai didn't prevent him from doing it. Seto does a lot to respect those that pass away, which is surprising considering his upbringing, though I'm personally not sure what that's supposed to mean. There were a lot of other things like symbols that show up constantly that you could read into if you wanted to as well. The characters in the story often refer back to the summer and the end of the summer, with Sai saying it's almost autumn and it's getting cold if you talk to her, and those animated dream sequences constantly referring to the summer that the story happens in. The summer can often symbolize coming of age, growth, or new beginnings, which makes a lot of sense in reference to the plot. Cats also show up all of the time in the story and are the only animals you see that aren't ghosts or hostile. Cats, as a symbol, often function as guides for the afterlife and are associated with a lot of that sort of thing. The cats in Fragile Dreams are attracted to Ren in some way, and they often help Seto find his way to her. So in a way, they're sort of guiding Seto throughout a lot of the story.
I know you're not a bad person. I can tell, because he likes you.
And of course, the moon and the sky are also incredibly prominent. Seto refers to the moon and the sky pretty often, and you have to gather a star and moon for Chio to prove you're trustworthy to her. Even in the daytime, the moon is nearly always visible in the game. Just like it was for the summer, the moon could also represent Seto's growth, but it's hard to say. The moon has a lot of symbolic meaning, so it could really mean a dozen different things like transformation, mysteries, or something as simple as death itself. There are just so many things here that are just ripe for deeper reading with Fragile Dreams, and I can't stress how much I enjoyed thinking about all of these themes and symbols as I made my way through the story. It's honestly a bit hard to say how much of it was thought of on purpose, because the delivery of a lot of these things is somewhat open to interpretation. Even the creators of the game admit as much. Regardless, I really fell in love with the world at the start of the game and only had more respect for it after processing the whole narrative. I'm really glad that I took the time to check out Fragile Dreams. This game that I thought was just some sort of anime RPG that had a horror flashlight gimmick turned out to be this really fascinating deep dive into human connection. The way that this game uses a relatively simple premise to have a complex discussion about the ways that people understand each other, I think is really beautiful. I really enjoyed thinking back on the story that's being told here, dissecting all of the concepts and trying to really get to the heart of what it's trying to say to you. I think some of the best art is there for you to think about it long after the fact. I'm sure there are some folks out there that see this sort of reflection on media as somewhat pretentious, but I really don't think that's always the case. And I really hope that you yourself can take a look at the art that you consume and think about it more on a deep level. While Fragile Dreams as a game that you play might not be the most entertaining thing ever made, I really think that what it's trying to say is a lot more important. And not to mention, I barely even touched on the fact that the music is also very great. I just hope that even if you didn't play the game but you watched the spoiler section, that you'll still come back to it and try it out and take a look at this game, and maybe you'll come to your own conclusions. Fragile Dreams is probably one of my favorite games I played in recent memory. It's really just such an interesting time, and I hope you enjoyed coming for the ride. But this video is already much longer than I expected it to be, and I'm gonna wrap it up here. If you had a good time here, it would be great if you liked the video, subscribe for more stuff like this in the future. If you've played the game before, I'd love to know what you thought about it below. If you want more stuff like this, I've got a few links in the description below for some more long-form JRPG videos or more obscure niche games. Either way, thank you so much for getting to the end of the video here, and I'll see you in the next one.